So when you change from being against debt to being for financial independence, for being for financially free, your life changes magically. And so those are the two things that I really use on an everyday basis. And the reason I talk about it with such passion is that all these tools and techniques are authentic because no one needs them more than I do. No one has more self-doubt than I have. I can guarantee that. No one questions themselves more. No one looks in the mirror and goes, oh, what are you doing now? You crazy man. You know, all these tools and techniques of what I've used to have this adventure in life. And so I can authentically pass them on to other people and say, these work, and I'm proof that they work.
Hi, it's Richard. Welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast, and also joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hey there.
And we have a very special guest today, Trevor Blake. He is a physicist by background who grew up extremely poor and bullied. He tapped into the workings of energy, consciousness, and transformation. This is perfect for our community, and in particular, the science behind it all, and began creating intentionally. I got to know Trevor a little bit through one of my friends, and I listened to an audiobook called 3 Simple Steps, which I really, really enjoyed. And I also really enjoyed the audio version. And he has also created a book called Secrets to a Successful Startup. Over the last 10 years, he's helped create and exit 3 separate companies for over $600 million. And here's the kicker of it all, I think. He never hired a single employee. Now that is particularly hard to do. I think we all want to do that a little bit. I would be happy with even like a 10th of that, maybe figuring out. Welcome, Trevor. It's really a great honor to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you, Richard. And thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. Hi, Kylie.
Hi.
And we normally start by just asking you to share a little bit of your backstory. And I know a little bit of your backstory because I've listened to your book, but maybe you could share for our listeners to know where you've come from, and then we can kind of jump into some of the things you're excited about today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think that the outside world sees me as a serial entrepreneur, as you described. Some people might see me as a writer because I've written a couple of books which were fairly successful, and I've also, not many people know, but I've written some movies too, which went on to be very successful. But I just see myself as a little kid from Liverpool. I just haven't grown up. I'm still a little kid having fun, So I was born in Liverpool, and by the time I was 7, we'd been evicted 3 times, and of course, to a 7-year-old kid, that was all just very exciting. It's like Chronicles of Narnia. I can't imagine how stressful it was for my parents. But after the 3rd eviction, we ended up escaping the creditors. And in those days, you could drive 60 miles in the country and no one would ever find you. So that's what happened. We got in the back of a van. We escaped overnight. The van broke down the next morning. And where it broke down, we ended up living. And so I grew up in the countryside of North Wales, which truly was just magical for me. And I'm so grateful for that. I know, everyone says out of adversity comes great opportunity. And that was certainly my first experience of that, because I would have been a different person if I hadn't have had the exposure to country life at such a young age, having come out of a concrete jungle. So whereas people who were born in that beautiful countryside might perhaps take it for granted or not notice how amazing it was, coming from the streets of Liverpool to this adventure in ancient woodland was just mind-blowing to me. And I was so open to it that I got my first experience of what it was like to play with energy. And so sort of privately as a kid, I would have these amazing experiences, these, psychic experiences and these animal communication experiences, because I was so open to it and nobody had told me, you're not supposed to waste your time doing that. And I've taken that on in my life. So I realized that if we learn to play with energy in a different way, we can not necessarily control our lives, but we can certainly draw to ourselves the adventures that we want instead of the adventures we don't want. And so that's pretty much my story. I've just been doing that since I was 7, and I keep on doing it. I'm 62 now, and I feel like I'm just starting a whole new adventure again. So
that's amazing. When you talk about playing with energy at a young age, and you've also talked about using physics in every amazing business accomplishment that you've made, can you kind of draw that parallel from your younger years of playing with energy to what you do with physics and business today? I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, the thing is, when people hear the word physics, they often want to hide behind some some blankets or something. It says, oh no, this is going to be complicated. So I'm a perpetual student of quantum physics, but my first degree is in radiation physics and nuclear medicine. And I was always fascinated with how or why things work. So how or why was I having those experiences as a kid? And I found, the answer, the secret source, was in understanding the world as energy. And so as an entrepreneur, I do exactly what I did as a kid. As a kid, I was written off as in terms of, what kind of life I was supposed to have as a poor kid in a place where I was English in Wales in the time when the English weren't very popular there. So I was suffering a lot of bullying. And I found that if I understood that everything's energy and I changed how I reacted to that energy, then I could change the outcome. So as an entrepreneur, I do exactly the same thing. I'll sit under a tree, I'll have this amazing idea, slap myself on the forehead and say, why didn't I have that idea 10 years ago? And then I'll convert the energy of that idea into a business. And that's all the energy is. It goes by a simple law that it can't be created or destroyed, only converted into another form. And once we understand that, we can pretty much build and create anything. It's what we do with the thought that we turn into a story. It's what we do with a winning idea that I turn into a business. And by approaching it that way, it takes away the stress of having to believe in myself. It takes away the stress of fear or self-doubt. I just simply know the scientific process of converting one form of energy into another form of energy. And I can't take any credit for it. I just learned it out of books when I was a kid.
Sometimes with our clients, we talk about getting in channel and being in channel. I guess there's kind of two questions. One is, how do you get into that flow where the ideas are coming in? Is it as simple as just sitting under a tree? And then where do you believe it comes from? Is it our higher self or God, or is it our own mind? What do you think?
Well, I think we all label it differently, but it's the same source. So for me, I understand that everything is connected. So in 2012, the Higgs field was finally confirmed as a discovery. And the Higgs field is this low energy that connects everything to everything and everyone to everyone. And, the sages for hundreds of years have been saying we're all connected, but I wanted proof of that. And then finally, these amazing scientists in Switzerland at CERN in 2012 put their hands up and said, those sages were correct. All the Alan Watts of the world, what they've been telling you is absolutely true. What we thought of as space in between the particles is no longer space, it's connection. And when you understand that, then you also understand that, the universe is expanding, therefore the connection is expanding. That means you're also connected to the past and the future at exactly the same time as the present. And that gives you a sense of power in that, okay, I'm no longer susceptible to randomness. I can control this and I can use this. So when I sit under a tree, let's say the three of us are sitting under the same tree. Well, you, Richard, might say, okay, I'm connected to my guardian angel. Or Kylie, you might say, I'm connected to my God. I'll say I'm connected through the Higgs field. And I'll go out into the Higgs field and I'll search for what I need and I'll pull it in. I know it sounds a lot of woo-woo, but it's actually very scientific. And so we're starting to see right now that the sage and the particle physicist are talking the same language. And who knows, they might share the same room one day and have a party together. I can't imagine what that would look like, but that's where we are. We're at the point where science, spirituality, and energy are all connected. And that's kind of the message I've got at trevorgblake.com, which is my website where I talk about all these things, is that it doesn't matter what you believe in, but if you can understand how and why something happens, then you can still keep your belief system, but you can now use it instead of being subject to it.
I like your mentioning of the sages. I spent 2 years of my life not working, not making any money, and just like getting up every morning at 5 and spending 5 hours studying the Vedic scriptures. And I found, of course, I was reading them in English, so there's a lot there that may be missed, but I found that those scriptures, which are the oldest ones on the planet, as far as I know, they resonated as being the most true thing that I've ever read in my life. And I was like, oh, these people are smart, So I love that you bring that up, because I think it's extremely relevant to everything that we're building in all of our businesses today. And for me personally, I took all the spiritual studies that I ever did, which I've studied extensively with spiritual teachers. I took it and I put it into my marketing. And it was highly effective without me ever being trained as a marketer. I just went out there and I'm like, if these are true for spirituality, then they must be true for marketing, because if they're true, they're true, right? And that's it. So I love that you brought that up. I know that you mentor other entrepreneurs. Do you find that people have difficulty wrapping their minds around these concepts, or like, are there common blocks that you see to people being able to apply some of the metaphysics and the physics to their chance of being successful?
I find the opposite, Kylie. I find people totally open to it and they embrace it. It's, to an extent, it's what we all wanted to believe, but we kind of were talked out of it by teachers and school environments and the workplace, and also parents and friends, right? And so what I find happens is people embrace it very quickly. It blows them. And I have a course called Transformation. At the very beginning of the course, I have a big disclaimer saying, don't go any further if you're afraid of change, because you can't unlearn what you're about to learn. You can't hide from it, and it will change your life. It's simply life-changing. It doesn't work for a few people or work more for one person than another person. It changes your life once you understand these concepts. And so people go into it, and very quickly, usually within the first couple of days, I start getting emails, all in capital letters, going, OMG, wow. They're seeing the world in a different place, a different way, and they're starting to feel, so I can take control of this. This feels amazing. And so they start to use it in different aspects of their life. So their relationships improve, their financial situation improves very quickly, typically. And then maybe a little while goes by, a couple of months, and I'll get the same people will send almost at the same time another wave of emails that say, again, oh my God, wow, I'm financially independent. Or, oh my God, wow, I'm out of debt for the first time in my life. Oh my God, I've just found my soulmate, even though the concept of soulmate is false, it doesn't exist. And I can explain that if anyone wants to get into it. But all of these things start to happen naturally. It feels like magic to everybody, which is why everyone gets excited, and they totally embrace it. And then typically they'll go on this journey where they get their life in order to an extent. And then they think, you know what? I no longer want to work in a corporate environment, or I no longer want to be the homemaker. I want to express myself in the world and create something. And in my groups, it's entrepreneurs, but it's also artists, musicians, writers, poets like yourself. The basic formula works no matter where you want to express it. So that's what I find anyway. But I haven't met anybody yet who's resistant to it.
Well, it's probably because people are just seeking and they're so open to everything you're doing. And it's kind of like one of those things when you turn your attention to that, it allows effortlessly into the flow. Now, I'm kind of curious because on a lot of your webpage and other things you do, there's a lot about only working 5 hours a day and no employees, almost kind of like a badge of honor, because I think probably a lot of us overcomplicate things. Can you take us through kind of like your thoughts about both employees and maybe using time more wisely? Because I think a lot of us get into this overdoing and a lot of it isn't as productive as we can. And I was talking to another mentor, friend, colleague, and she was saying a lot of times when I'm working with people, I have to resuscitate them first. They're so tired and overwhelmed. I thought it was super funny. Like they were like, yeah, I have to resuscitate the potential client first before they're even open to listening. So maybe you could share this idea of how to get overwhelmed and how you kind of structure your day, because it seems like you've been successful throughout your whole life to do this.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. I've had an amazing adventure. Thanks for the question, because this is really important. It sounds a bit corny, right, to say the 5-hour workday. I've got to be honest and confess here. I don't work 5 hours. I barely work 2, and it's been like that for decades. To tell people you can only need to work 2 hours a day seemed too much. And I wrote so it's a free download on trevorblake.com, no strings attached. And so I kind of wrote it ahead as the COVID pandemic was hitting. So many, there was a tsunami of people going to work at home, and I could see the mental health issues that would cause with it, to suddenly be working at home with no distractions, no water fountain to hang around, no one knocking on your office, talking about last night's football game and stuff like that. You can get burned out really quickly. And that's exactly what happened for a lot of people. So I put it out there for those who could, for people to say, okay, the 5-hour workday is not new, it's old. Before the Industrial Revolution, that's how people worked. They had their priorities right. They had First of all, it was family, spirit, leisure, and then work. And the average work day in 1740 was less than 4 hours. And this usually surprises people. So what I'm saying is we have this wonderful technology or access to technology today that can get us back to that village-centric way of working. We can use artificial intelligence. We can use simple tools. The tool we're using now eliminates the need to drive to an office to go to a meeting. We 3 of us are gathered very quickly, very easily, and we're straight into the conversation. And so I learned, so there's 2 aspects to this. So first of all, I learned it when I was a kid because I was getting bullied. And the only way I could kind of escape the bullies was to hide somewhere. So I hid in the town library. And while I was in there, I hid at the back in the reference section. So I just started reading. And they had all these biographies. So I just started reading biographies. And this is where I found the 3 simple steps. This is what changed my life. It's funny, so in the worst circumstances, the best thing happened. And so with all these biographies, it didn't matter what world these people lived in. It was adventurers, and it was business people, and it was creators, inventors. They all kind of had the same or similar patterns of behavior. And one of their patterns of behavior was they seemed to spend more time walking in the trees than they did actually working. And I was fascinated by that. And then their breakthrough moment didn't come while they were on the production line, or while they were, like today, we'd be at a laptop trying to crack some problem. It happened when they were walking in the woods. It happened when they were swimming. It happened when they were totally distracted. This moment of insight that's worth a lifetime of experience. And so I kind of picked up on that, and I started to actually bring that into my life when I was very young. And then my first sort of exposure to the world was in the Royal Navy, and they're pretty smart, the Royal Navy. They don't have people working 16-hour days because you tend to crash your ship when you do that. So you work 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. And so I started out that way. Then one day I found myself in the corporate world, and it was just all meetings, meeting after meeting after meeting, unnecessary, soul-destroying, energy-sucking meetings. And I was pretty good at it. I can bullshit as good as anybody. So I actually built a fast-track career just BSing in the boardroom type of thing. And when I started my first company, I didn't want that. I realized I spent 75% of my corporate career in a meeting room talking about things that had nothing to do with customer satisfaction, that had nothing to do with creating an impact in the world. And we're all about how to make the employees stay longer or be happier or give them more benefits. It was just madness. I think a lot of people listening to this have been through that corporate madness. And so I decided there has to be a better way. So I created a business model that's built entirely on vendors and consultants and contractors. And it's one of the best things I ever did. So as an entrepreneur, I have this thing called the hub model, which is in Secrets to a Successful Startup, how to do that. And what I found was it totally freed me up, because my management style had to change from supervisory to peer-on-peer trust. And for a while, I had the temptation to keep picking the phone up and saying, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And then eventually I realized that these people know what they're doing. They don't need supervision. They're really enjoying the ownership in this project. I'll go away. And the first test was when I went on vacation to England. I went for 3 weeks and my phone didn't work. And so when I got back to America, I was thinking, it's going to be chaos. There's got to be all these fires to put out. And to my surprise and pleasure, I suppose, no one had noticed I'd gone. It had all just carried on. And I realized that my one and only skill as an entrepreneur is to have the common sense to get out of people's way and let them do the things they're good at. So that's how it all evolved. It came from biographies to a personal life experience in the military, then to applying that into my businesses. And the businesses, I think, have been really successful because of that. These are serious businesses, as you said, nine-figure dollar exits. And that's how I do it. So once people grasp that it's all about a winning idea, it's all about those aha moments, then the sense of breaking up the day from let's do a couple of hours of productive work, because scientifically it's shown we can't concentrate for more than 2 hours at a time, then take 2 hours break, go and do something that you enjoy, and there the magic happens. And then you come back and you react to the magic you just had, and you're pretty much done at that point for the day. And that's how I run it. So if anyone's interested in it, it's simply the practical magic of the 5-hour workday. It's available for free on trevorgblake.com, and your life as you know it will change the moment you read it.
That's incredible. I'll take some of that. So I'm super curious. What do you do in your 2 hours? What do you, because you made $600 million in exits. You haven't hired anybody. So I'm guessing that you have a capability or a talent with finding the most important things to leverage all of that in that 2 hours. Will you tell us a little bit about what those 2 hours actually look like for you?
So I was blessed, and another brilliant question, Kylie. So thank you. I was very blessed in my life, and still am, to have been surrounded by women with incredible intuition. So my mother was a total inspiration to me, despite the difficult circumstances she was in. She just knew stuff, and I was fascinated how you just know stuff. And she would smile and she'd say, "Oh, the trees tell me," or something like that. I didn't know what she was talking about as a kid, but then I've learned that she knew how to play with energy. And so she introduced me. I was taking her to the hospital for her chemotherapy. She was given 6 months to live when I was 7. Okay, so but she lived till I was 21 and a bit. And when I was about 20, I was taking her to for chemotherapy in a hospital just outside Liverpool. And she said, "Oh, I want to introduce you to somebody." And she looked around and there's nobody there. So, and we waited in the middle of the corridor. She sat in the wheelchair, and I'm thinking that I think the cancer's gone to her brain. This isn't good. And then suddenly, about what seemed like 5 minutes, but was probably 20 seconds, a door opened and out walked a nurse. And she said, "I want you two to meet." And she introduced me to the nurse, who she said, "This is my favorite chemotherapy nurse." And the chemotherapy nurse looked a bit taken aback by all of this. And I married that chemotherapy nurse and was with her I married her for 38 years, was with her 40 years. She unfortunately died in December 2020, but she also had this incredible ability to connect. And I was fascinated by it. So my wife's name is Lynn, or was my late wife's name is Lynn. And she had this amazing ability, this clairaudient ability to connect. And I was fascinated by it. So I learned with these two amazing women to deepen my intuition. And then there was another day when, after Lynn has passed over, she gives me a message I committed to her when she was in intensive care for 6 weeks. I committed to build a psychic bridge. And I did it in a kind of, I probably didn't take it seriously at the time. I was giving her hope. But then afterwards, she never let me forget it. And so she's helped me build this psychic bridge back to her. And she pointed me in a direction. One day she whispers in my ear, "Send Jess a message." I did. And Jess and I got married in last November, right? Now, Jess also has this incredible intuition that's in overdrive. All of this, there's a long-winded story. All of this is to say that I want a piece of that. If I could bottle women's intuition, I'd be the richest man on the planet, without a doubt. If I could bottle 10% of it, I'd be the richest man on the planet. So I've learned that this ability to connect and to just know things is incredibly valuable. And I was fascinated by it. And so I have found that in the 2 hours, I work for 2 hours, and then I will, with great discipline, doesn't matter what I'm doing, I stop. And I will go for a walk on my own in nature with no expectation. My phone stays at home. It's me and nature. And I'll do certain tools and techniques that are available in the transformation experience at trevorblake.com. I'll do some of those tools and techniques that deepen my intuition, my connection to my intuition, and deepen my connection through nature to a kind of universal source of knowledge. All sounds like woo-woo, I know, but I do this as a physicist, not as a sage. And that's what I do. And I come back with these amazing solutions to what I thought were problems before I left. So I make sure I schedule my day like that, no more than 2 hours work, then disappear over a mountain somewhere or through a woods. And that's what I do.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I'm really fascinated about the things that you do when you walk. I know that I've been downloading a lot of material, and I found with my family, and I got a new dog and all kinds of things, the only time I could figure out to get time for myself was I was getting up at like 4:30 in the morning. But then I realized I would go for these long, hour and a half walks. I was realizing, oh my God, like it's like the mind's quiet, and it was like drop in, drop in, drop in, drop in. And I'd solve a lot of the problems before the day even began. And it was good for my physical fitness too. So it was like kind of reclaiming that or reconnecting with the source, not in dreams, but in the 3D world. Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings me to the next question, which I'm kind of curious. I think most of the people in this world struggle with balance. There's a few things in life that, we're marketers and we help people market their things. And the two things I always joke about that are kind of hard to sell are the first used to be breathing, but for some reason breathing became really popular in the last 5 years with Wim Hof and all these people, James Nestor with his book Breath. And so it's great because like it's like one of the most powerful things you can do in the world is learn how to breathe differently. And then the corollary to that is the second thing that's the hardest thing that to sell or to get people to understand is actually balance, because nobody wants what, or people say they want balance, but then when you actually tell them what they need to do or what it's all about, they typically have a hard time. So I know that your tagline on your site is success is balance. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, success with balance. So basically it's not success at the cost of everything else. And there's a magic in it, there's a beauty in it. And the reason I am that way and have that way is that I'm basically a really lazy person. So I would much rather lie in a hammock all day than sit in an office or go do some work. So for me, my balance has actually been making myself do some work. Whereas for other people, it'll be just, slow down, take some time out. For me, relationships are 100 times more important than work. For other people, work becomes really important. There's no judgment there, but if we go too extreme in one or the other, we kind of mess our lives up a little bit. So it's just a question of it's about getting that balance right. And I think when people see that a guy, on his own can build some companies and have some sort of modest success with that, and has a long-term relationship and is clearly really happy. I've only had 2 relationships my whole life, so one lasted 40 years. I've just started another one. I think everyone wants that balance. I think everyone wants to feel that way. And like you, I've had 5 dogs in my life too. So I've had an animal sanctuary as well, which I just closed or actually gave to a school. And so all of these things add to it. As we talked right at the beginning, I like to write. I love nothing more than just writing for a couple of hours a day. And so people often say, well, how can you do all of that? And it's the art of doing nothing, right? So if I'm flying on a plane somewhere, I'm not going to watch a movie. I'm going to write. I'm going to use that time creatively. I'm not going to sit in a hotel room all night. I'm going to go out and take a walk. I'm going to make sure that I get the balance in my life as correct as I can. And it just requires a little discipline. And also you have to experience it. So I say to people, don't try and get success with balance tomorrow. Don't try and do a 5-hour workday tomorrow, but just try to build in something that's more healthy, something more beneficial. So if you were planning to spend an hour on social media in the evening, don't, just start to go for a walk for an hour. Maybe just sit in a chair and stare at a view or something. Maybe when was the last time you saw a starlit sky? Just start to build in these beautiful moments, and the balance starts to filter into your life. And then the reticular activation system, which basically controls us, our brainstem, it realizes, oh, my host likes doing nothing. So I'll find a way for my host to continue to do more of nothing. And that's kind of how you build it into your life. I think it's hard to screech the brakes on and then immediately go to a 5-hour workday, but you can certainly start to build in like you did. You go for a nice long walk. It's a great start. You spend 30 minutes in the bath instead of a 5-minute shower once in a while. There's things like that. You just start to build this balance back into your life. And as one does it, it starts to feel new, but remind yourself that actually it's ancient. This is the way people have always been. It's just the Industrial Revolution messed us up a little bit, and we're getting out of it now, thankfully.
So this is all super fascinating and amazing. I'm just so curious how you manage to leverage and scale all your ideas and all your businesses without a team. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, it's not really without a team. It's just a different type of team. So
okay.
When I was in the corporate world, whenever we had a launch, we never had enough people or enough stuff or enough suppliers. And so we would bolt onto us all of these contractors who could help us through launch mode. So probably the only bright idea I had, and it was out of necessity because I didn't have a lot of money when I started my first company. I certainly couldn't afford it to have hired anybody right at the start. I went to companies like that and said, look, instead of just being a bolt-on to help for launches, why don't you be my function? So I had the manufacturer was a contractor, the distributor was a contractor, regulatory was contracted, and I just built this hub. And my role changed from being kind of the CEO, the guy in charge, all this sort of thing, to being like a conductor of an orchestra. So I was confident enough to know that as a conductor, I probably can't play any instruments as well as the people in the orchestra, but I know harmony when I hear it. And so it was just a case of getting the right vendors, and I used my intuition for that. Didn't do a lot of analysis. Having the sense to recognize that I'm small and new, and so don't be a pain in the arse to these people. They've got contracts probably from massive companies. Use those contracts. Don't wordsmith, just say, yes, I'll sign it. And also, it was so much more important to get the best vendor than the best price. So I spent very little time negotiating with vendors. I just met them and intuitively felt if they were the right ones or the wrong ones. And then on top of that, something that I think in America is considered politically incorrect to talk about, but for me is absolutely secret sauce to this hub model, is I made sure I had an equal sprinkling of women and men leaders. And the reason I did that was in the corporate world, the only really happy experience I had was in a company that was 50% female leadership and 50% male leadership. In every other case, it was mostly male leadership, and it was quite toxic. When I used to work in the hospital, it was almost all female leadership, and it was toxic. And so I find that balance of masculine and feminine power really, really, really is powerful and a beautiful place to work and to drop in. So I sprinkled those little bits of magic that I'd learned through reading all those biographies when I was younger, because I also noticed that's how they became successful. And that's all my secrets right now. You know everything.
I have a feeling we don't know everything, but you're giving us a good window into your world. I'm also really curious, and I think this is really relevant to a lot of the people listening. It seems like throughout your life, you've had to kind of go against what people think is possible, and also sometimes take a stand that's against whatever their people say. And I know you've mentioned bullying a few times and how the impact that's had on you, and how you have used that to approach business. I'm kind of curious, as people are stepping into their path, or maybe they have a movement they want to start, and everybody around them is going, what are you doing? Or they start to move out there in the world, and there's this online bullying, but even just like small cuts of like, what are you doing? And these small negative feedback. I think a lot of the world doesn't know what to do with that, and a lot of people like curl back into their hole and then don't get out there. I'm kind of curious what you would recommend or how you approach it.
Yeah, there's several aspects to that. I'll focus on two. So the first one is mentality control. It's really critical for anyone in any adventure in life, because what I find is, when I'll as an example, when I put my head above the crowd and said, look, so my career counselor said, Trevor, you're 16, you need to get a career. We've got you this package. And she handed me an application form to be an apprentice manager in a chicken packing factory down the road. And it shocked the hell out of me that that's the way the world saw me. Even at that point, I saw myself very differently. I responded to her and said, sorry, I don't want that. I'm going to be an officer in the Royal Navy. And she laughed. And her laughter crushed me. And I started to have all this self-doubt, and I went home thinking I'm crazy. I thought I was in on this. I'd been talking to my mum about it. She'd taken me to the recruitment office. I'd talked to a recruiting officer. He had laughed at me and said, people from your place in life don't become naval officers. It's just not done. Go back and get a real job. And so I realized this is an issue for me. And at the same time, I'm reading all these biographies, and I was amazed at how they were all criticized. They were all condemned, how they were able to protect themselves. It's almost like they lived in a bubble. And then I came across a technique called the bell jar. And it was Jack Black taught a golfer who was struggling on the golf course because everybody loved Jack Nicklaus and he was a new kid on the block, Seve Ballesteros, and he struggled with the hostility. And so he taught him to put this bell, imagine a bell jar descending from the sky. It's almost bulletproof glass, and no one knows you're doing this. You're doing it in your head. And you imagine all this hostility bouncing off. And I thought that was genius. And so I did it for myself. And then all of a sudden, the bullies started to disappear because I wasn't reacting to it. The laughter I was getting at school, because everyone now knew I'd put my head above the crowd. Everyone was taking shots at me. Who the hell are you? Who do you think you are? You're a joke, all this kind of stuff. But the mentality shield really helped me. Inside my little jar, my little private bubble, I was going to do that. And of course, 18 months after that, I joined the Royal Navy as an officer. So I learned my lesson very, very quickly. So that's the important thing. Mentality control is really important. There's some tools and techniques I've got in 3 simple steps. You will have listened to them in the Audible book. There's more. I got about 30 of them in the transformation experience that help people get this mentality protection, so that you become free. Because the true measure, this is one of my favorite quotes, the true measure of freedom is to be independent of the good opinion of other people, not the bad opinion, the good opinion. Most of us make decisions because we want to be liked, or we want to be loved. We want people to pat us on the back. Well, when you put your head above the crowd and say, I'm going in a different direction, you don't get that love, even from the people that do love you, because they're afraid you're going to make a mistake. They're afraid you're going to make a fool of yourself. So even out of kindness, they will throw these negative thoughts your way. Especially me being a Brit, it's like, come on, you're a Brit now, tone it down a little bit. So you have this mentality control. It's really, really important. The second thing is, when you decide that you're going to make an impact in the world and you're prepared for all this to come on, you have to form the mentality of being for something, not against something, because this is energy at work now. All thoughts, all words are energy, and energy has no choice but to convert into its material form. So all the thoughts that we've all had, that we've put out into the universe, either stay in the universe out there, which is a scary thought on its own, or they come back to give us those things we thought about. So for instance, great example will be debt. Most people, when they see how much credit card debt, their stomach turns over and they go, oh no, how did I get into that much mess? I feel a fool. And they go against debt. Those thoughts have no choice but to come back and give you more of what you're against. So you get more reasons to go in debt. Something will happen to the roof, or you'll have a flood in the house and you need more, more debt to continue. When you change that, let's say we'll continue with debt. So when you change from being against debt to being for financial independence, for being for financially free, your life changes magically. And so those are the 2 things that I really use on an everyday basis. And the reason I talk about it with such passion is that all these tools and techniques are authentic, because no one needs them more than I do. No one has more self-doubt than I have. I can guarantee that. No one questions themselves more. No one looks in the mirror and goes, oh, what are you doing now? You crazy man. All these tools and techniques of what I've used to have this adventure in life. And so I can authentically pass them on to other people and say, these work, and I'm proof that they work. So 2 things: make sure you have some mentality control, lots of tools and techniques around for that. And secondly, switch the way you think and talk from being against stuff to being for solutions. Mother Teresa once said that when she was asked by a reporter on her opinion of a particular battle or war that was going on. And she said, young man, I'm not against war, I'm for peace. And I thought that was so powerful, and it stayed with me my whole life.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mother Teresa and marketing. That's a good start to my day over here. I love her. I'm kind of still stuck on this 2-hour thing, to be honest with you. I'm so fascinated by it. I'm curious, what advice do you have for some of the people listening here that are still pushing a boulder up a hill, trying to get everything done and trying to do everything instead of riding the magic carpet like you are? How do we go from stress and pressure to the magic and the flow? And I do think a lot of our people in particular, they want to do what they love doing, and they don't want to do all the rest of the stuff that they don't want to do, like all the marketing and all this and all that. So how do they start to shift gears?
Well, follow the science. Okay. So follow the facts, and that takes away the pressure of having to believe anything, because that can be really stressful. So you follow the science. Science clearly shows, and you can just search online to get confirmation of this. You don't need to read any of my books or courses or anything. Science shows that the human being has several problems. One is they can't concentrate for more than 2 hours. Some science says more than 10 minutes. But it's important after 2 hours, you kid yourself that you're in the zone and you get diminishing returns. As writers, we all know this, because typically if you write for 6 hours in a row, only the first 2 hours was worth it and the rest goes in the trash can the next day. And that's typical of even in business. So you can only concentrate for 2 hours. Science also shows that you need to reboot the brain after 2 hours. And so if you don't believe me, go to NASA. NASA has all its pilots take a 30-minute nap just after lunchtime. And that increases their reflex and their performance rate 34%. This is scientific. So if it works for them, I'm smart enough to say, wow, I'm going to do that. So I actually do take a nap. I make myself a nap, and I've had some amazing breakthrough ideas in that sort of midday nap that I have. So following the science is key. Science also shows that everything in the universe is energy. Therefore, it probably is quite smart to tap into that. And so scientifically, and again, in 3 Simple Steps or in the transformation experience, I provide, reams of evidence of the power and the benefit of transcendental forms of meditation. Now, as soon as I say the word meditation, a lot of people will put their hands, put their head in their hands and go, not again. It's by far the number one thing that has helped me through my life. And it was in all those biographies. And they called it different things. And I call it different. I call it taking quiet time to try and take out the complicated part of it. There's a million ways to meditate, just as there's a million ways to go get exercise or play sport. And so my favorite is simply to sit in a chair and do nothing for 20 minutes once a day. And just by introducing those things, what you do is you create what I call a sense of awe, which is perceptual vastness. That's the definition of it. So you start to perceive things in a more vast way. When you do that and you create awe in your life, it automatically creates flow for you. So you don't have to do anything. You just have to follow the clues. And life, I call it, set an intention, let life fill in the details. Life will throw things in your direction and you just follow along. You'll bump into amazing people. It happens to me all the time. It happened last night. Exactly what I was looking for. Bumped into a person walking his dog just down the road here. And this person is beta testing a new company software program that could potentially take out some things like this beautiful technology that we're using right now. All of these things happen when you create the sense of awe that leads to flow. And so for anyone listening or watching, the good news is you don't have to do very much. You just have to decide to change. You just have to introduce a few good, healthy disciplines into your life. Do some meditation, get into nature more, create this feeling of, wow, my life is changing, some magic is showing up, and that creates the flow. You'll automatically go in that direction. And the reason you don't have to do anything, and the reason that happens, is for the reticular activation system we have in the brainstem. There's only humans and some reptiles have this grouping of neurons in the back, and it keeps us in a loop. And it doesn't have any emotion, it doesn't have any judgment. And so if every day you're watching news headlines, it will keep you in a loop where the world you see is a negative world. If, on the other hand, you substitute the news headlines for something a bit more inspiring, a good biography or a walk in the woods or something, it will start to switch towards that. And you start to see the world in a much better way. And when you do that, you get better experiences. It really is. It's incredibly simple. That's why my book is called 3 Simple Steps. But it's not easy because you do have to commit to the discipline. You've got to say, okay, I'm going to do it this way for a while and see what happens.
Well, this has been just truly fascinating, and I feel like you're part of our soul family here. I think our listeners are really going to resonate with everything you've shared today, Trevor. Thank you for spending time out of your busy or unbusy day to have a break to do a podcast. I know you have a website, trevorgblake.com, and Trevor is with a VOR, trevorgblake.com. That's where they can find out all about you and your programs. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah.
It's a one-stop shop, I guess. So everything's there. There's a lot of articles. I think there's 300 podcasts of my own I call Trev's Keys. So there's lots of free stuff available. And the main thing is if the listeners and the watchers never connect with me again, download the Practical Magic of the 5-Hour Workday, and you'll never regret at least that move, at least that action. And the rest is pure fun.
I love it. I also love the fact that it's really the 2-hour workday, but you put 5 because we wouldn't believe the 2 hours. So that's like that's super funny to me too. Kylie, any last thoughts for Trevor here as we leave our audience with this amazing podcast?
I just appreciate you being here. I hope we stay in contact in one form or another. It's been just a real joy and a pleasure to get to know you better. So thank you for spending your time with us.
Thank you, Kylie. Appreciate it. Thank you, Richard. And we have no choice but to keep in touch, because by having this conversation, we just created a thing called quantum entanglement. If you want to know what that is, go to trevorgblake.com.
And we can do it through the Higgs field. I learned that today too.
Yep.
So it's all good. Thanks, Trevor. And for all the listeners here, you can get the show notes at consciousmarketer.com/podcast. We'll put also the link to Trevor's website. He also has a LinkedIn profile, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We'll put those links there as well, so you know how you can get a hold of him. You can also find his books and work on Amazon, and I've purchased them. I highly recommend going there and getting those. Thanks again, Trevor, for a wonderful interview, and look forward to staying in touch.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
And thanks to all the listeners. See you on the next episode. Bye for now.